I'm Annie Duke. As we mentioned earlier, the relative rank of your starting cards is an important factor in determining which hands you're going to play. But it's not the only one. Your position at the table is also critical because it directly impacts how easy your decisions are going to be throughout the hand. In short, being in late position is more advantageous than being in early position. Now, before we explain why position is so important, let's begin by defining what position is. In the simplest terms, your position in the hand is always defined as your relationship to the button. Now, let's break the table down into 4 quadrants: early position, middle position, late position, and then, of course, the blinds. At a 10-handed table, the 3 seats just to the left of the big blind would comprise early positions at the table. So if the player on the button is seat 10, the player who is first to act pre-flop is the player in seat 3, followed by seat 4 and seat 5. Now, middle position would consist really of just players seated in, say, 6 and 7. And the players in the 8, 9, and 10 seats are said to be in late position. Now, at this particular table, the player in the 8 seat is sitting in the hijack, while the player in the 9 seat is sitting in cutoff, and the player in the 10 seat is on the button, which is obviously the best position at the table. Now, the 2 positions to the immediate left of the button are the small blind and the big blind, respectively. Pre-flop, the players in the blinds have the luxury of acting last in the hand. However, after the flop, if they're still in the hand, the players in the blind are now going to have to act first, and they really need to take that into account. So now that we understand what position is, let's look at why it's so important. In this example, the player in the seat that's the 3 seat, in other words, under the gun, is technically in the worst position because he has to be the first person to decide if he's going to voluntarily put his chips into the pot. With 7 players, not including the players in the blinds, left to act behind him, this means there's a lot of potential for someone else to have a strong hand that they may want to raise or call with. Since the player in the 3 seat has no information about the strength of anyone else's hands, generally, he should only consider coming into the pot with, a premium to very solid hand, such as the bigger pocket pairs, ace, king, ace, queen. As action moves around the table, the remaining players will get to see the action that has taken place in front of them, making it easier for them to judge the relative strengths of their hole cards. Plus, they're going to have fewer people left back behind them. Now, a player in the 7 seat may decide to open the pot for a raise with a very weak hand, something like even as low as 4s or king jack. If everyone in front of him folds, because there are only a few players left to act behind him and there are fewer chances of someone having a stronger hand, he can then open up his range. Now, on the other hand, if a player in the 5 seat raises, the player in the 7 seat may just decide to call with his smaller pocket pairs in hopes of, hitting a set on the flop, or maybe bluffing if he doesn't hit since he has position on the other player. Now, with this in mind, here are some general guidelines to help you determine which hands you should play in which position. Now, in early position, you're going to want to play mostly, premium to very solid hands that either, could stand being re-raised or that you're willing to play big pots with out of position. You should be very wary of hands like ace-jack or king-queen because they're very easily dominated by the kinds of hands that are willing to call your raise. And when you're dominated, it can cost you a lot of chips if, in this sense, you're unlucky enough to hit something like top pair. Now, in middle position, you can begin opening up your range a little bit. Since there are fewer players to left act behind you, you can really raise with, hands like, king-queen suited, king-jack suited. You can start to get into like 6s, 7s, 5s, 4s. And those hands may be more troublesome in early position, but in middle position, they're playable. Now, in late position, here's the good news. You can really play almost any 2 cards, but this is important. If the action has folded around to you, in other words, if you're the first person in, you can really open up that range to most of the deck, at least the top, 70 or 80% of the deck, because you really don't have very many players to act behind you. And certainly on the button, you've only got the blinds to act, and they're always going to have to go before you on the later rounds, which is going to give you a huge advantage. Now, Be careful if the blinds call or re-raise your hand, though, because the chances are they may be holding a pretty good hand of their own. Remember, though, that you will have position on them, so that should be taken into consideration about how you play out the rest of the hand.